Hey, what's up YouTube? King James here. Now that Season 3 is in full launch, it's clear that it's an AR meta this season. Last season was all about the tactical rifles. They're still good, but now the ARs are also good and can compete. So it got me thinking, just like my SMG shootout I did, I want to do an AR comparison. See which ones are the best, look at a bunch of criteria, and see if we can figure out, which AR is the best to use based on different playstyles. Because everybody sort of likes to play a little different, and each AR has a different reason why you would use it. Not just whichever one has the, does the most damage. So I put everything together, the same as the the SMG shootout, but now for the ARs. And I've got that ready for you right now. So I got my sheet set up exactly the same as we did for the SMG shootout. I've got all the guns listed on the top here, and then I've got the rating system, which will update as we go to show who's in first place. The guns I'm going to be covering are 4 from Modern Warfare, 4 from Cold War. So the Cold War guns are Fire 83, Krig 6, AK-47, and the XM4, and from Modern Warfare, M4A1, the GRA, the Ram 7, and the CR56. I didn't really include the Kilo, only because the Kilo and the GRA really aren't all that different. So if you're using a Kilo, you can just look at the GRA stats for it. It's just a slightly slower time to kill, so it's just a little bit worse than the GRA. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot of difference. But because it's a popular gun, or was a popular gun, I wanted to mention it so nobody, sort of thought I forgot about it. Now, for the ranking system, some of the comments I got before was that I was unfairly ranking some guns down really low. So I'm going to try and group a little better, so no gun is getting ranked a 1. I'll try and go 8 and maybe not go any lower than a 4 or 5 in any particular zone. So I'm not unfairly ranking guns way down too far. So thanks to some of you guys who gave me that feedback. So we're going to try and be a little bit more objective with it this time. All of these are basically data based except for overall feel. This is just my feeling of using the gun when I was using it. It's the only subjective one, and you may differ your opinion from it, and that's okay. So let's start with time to kill. So when it comes to time to kill, the CR56 is the best gun in its class. It's not the easiest gun to use, but it definitely has the fastest time to kill. The AK-47 also has a pretty fast time to kill, but again, it's also got a pretty gnarly recoil pattern. So this is sort of the trade-off. When you get a really fast time to kill, it's going to be a harder gun to use. Now, the guns that are really easy to use, like the GRA, it's super smooth. Look at the time to kill on it. And the same thing with the Kilo, right? Time to kill is really long at it at range, but that's because they're so smooth and easy to use. So your trade-off is, right, faster time to kill, the gun's a little harder to use. So let's go ahead and rank these. All right, so the CR56 gets 8 because it's the best gun in its class. I'm going to give 7 to both the AK-47 and the XM4 because they're both in the sort of the mid 600 range. I gave 6 to the Fire 83 because it's in the upper 800s, 5 to the Krig, and 4 to the M4A1 and the GRA. So next, let's have a look at the overall feel. So the Fire 83 is the one gun that really surprised me. When it first came out, it really wasn't that great. It had brutal recoil and it didn't do a lot of damage. Basically, nobody really used it. But they've buffed it in Season 3. They fixed the recoil pattern, and it also does more damage than it used to. So now when I use it, I find that it's really smooth and I can get a ton of hit markers. Like when I'm shooting a guy, very few of the bullets, if any, actually miss. It's one gun that's really smooth and super easy to use. If you're looking for a new AR and you're not sure what to use, the Fire 83 is probably of the Cold War guns, the smoothest shooting, easy to use, and still has a really good time to kill. It's one gun that I really enjoy. Now the Krig 6 is not much different from the Fire 83. It's sort of the M4's GRA. It's not that different. It does a little bit more damage, but it is also a little harder to use in that it has a tiny bit more visual and actual recoil. So it's not that it's going to take you a whole lot of time to learn how to use this one with the Fire 83, but it definitely has a little bit more recoil. So if eliminating recoil is your thing, the Fire 83 would be better, but this gun is certainly easy to use. Now the AK-47, it's definitely harder to use because it's got a ton of recoil. Now it hits really hard, which makes up for all that recoil, but it definitely has more recoil, and getting long distance shots with it is a lot harder, if not impossible. As you can see by all my clips here, they're all close medium range because I just couldn't get long distance kills with it. This is about the longest I could get anybody down with it. Maybe it's just me, but I just didn't find it was a long distance gun. And I'm shooting down the hallway here, and it's just the recoil and the pattern on it just isn't doing it for me. Now the XM4 is the one gun that really looks good on paper, but when I was using it, there's something about the pattern or the recoil or something about it. It just isn't it. It just doesn't do it. And like right here, watch when I shoot this guy, it goes up and I miss my shots and then it goes down. Like I found that with this gun all the time. It's either going up or down on me and I never know which way the thing's going and I could never control it. It just felt really inconsistent. So it just was not my favorite gun to use out of all the guns. And then there's the M4A1. I've been using the M4A1 for a long time. It's a very consistent gun. Now, it's not a really hard-hitting gun, but it is a smooth gun, and it certainly is, you know, has a good place if you like to use the Modern Warfare guns. It's one of my more favorite Modern Warfare guns, and I never had trouble getting headshots. Like right here, watch this, right on the guy's head. I found it was pretty easy to do that with the VLK. It's a good scope, although I kind of wish it was big like the axial arms, but it was definitely an effective weapon. So the GRA, I don't think there's a whole lot of guns in the game that are smoother than the GRA, save for maybe the M13, which is a pea shooter. Nobody uses it. So if you want something that's a little better than a pea shooter, definitely this gun. Whenever I'm having a bad game, and we all have those nights where everything is just going wrong, I'll pull the GRA out again because it's like putting on an old pair of slippers. It's comfortable, it's easy, and when I'm having a bad night, it tends to make things better because you go back to the easiest to use gun in the game, and it generally makes things a little bit better for you. So I've done that a bunch of times and been pretty successful with it. I always like going back to it. Now, the Ram 7 definitely has a skill gap on it. If you are a new player to Warzone, I definitely wouldn't recommend the Ram 7 being the first gun you try. It's got a lot of recoil, it's harder to use, but it makes up for it in how quickly it can kill guys. It definitely has a fast time to kill. It hits hard and it shoots fast. It also works really well with iron sights. You can use it like the FFAR back in Season 2 with iron sights. It's definitely really effective for that, but it's a higher skill gun. Now, the CR56 AMAX, it definitely has more recoil than the other Modern Warfare guns, but it also hits really hard. It is not the smoothest gun like the GRA is, but when you're hitting your shots with this thing, it downs guys like crazy. But look at here at the longer range, I'm definitely missing a couple of those shots. So that's the one thing. It's got a bit of a skill gap on it in that, you know, it's going to be harder to use and it's going to take you more time to get good with it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rank those based on my thoughts on how each one works. So I gave 8s to both the FARA 83 and the Krig 6, just because they're super easy to use, very smooth, have large scopes, and minimal recoil. I gave a 7 to the CR56, only because it has more recoil and hitting longer distance shots is definitely harder than the FARA or the Krig. And then 6 to the M4A1 and the GRA. Now, they're definitely easy to use, but they just don't have the firepower, so you end up having to hit a lot more bullets, which from an overall feel for me, makes the time to kill longer. It just doesn't feel quite as good. And then the Ram 7, I like the Ram 7, I enjoy using it, but it certainly is a harder gun to use. And the XM4 and the AK-47, they just don't do it for me. I don't like the recoil on the AK-47, it's just too much, and I can't hit anything long distance. And the XM4, I don't know what it is, it just doesn't do it for me, so I'm giving it a 4. Sorry if that's your favorite gun. So next up is damage, and by damage I mean how much damage can the gun put out. So there's head, chest, and stomach damage, but there's also the number of bullets that the gun can carry. So what I did is I took a little bit of math and I looked at how many bullets the gun can hold times the damage it does to the chest, which is sort of our most common shooting location. So I look at each gun, and the AK-47 definitely is the king, closely followed by the XM4, and then, you know, the Krig 6, and then in the 1600 is, you know, these guns, and Ram being the last. So let me go ahead and rank those. So this is one area where the AK-47 is going to do well. It does a ton of damage. It can deal 2,500 damage out of a single magazine if you hit all chest shots. So that's going to get an 8. The Krig 6 and the XM4, they're pretty close, so they're both going to get a 7. A 6 to the FARA, the M4 and the GRA, and a 5 to the Ram, only because it's got a small mag and doesn't do a ton of chest damage, so it only does 1,400. But it's got a pretty fast reload, and not to say that the gun doesn't perform. All right, next is reload speed. And the reload speeds are listed here, so I'm just going to go ahead and rank them from highest to lowest. So I gave an 8 to both the AK-47 and the GRA. They have the fastest reload speeds. M4A1 and the CR56 came in at second with 7, and then 6 for the Ram and the Krig, and 5 for the FARA. Because, you know, 317, it definitely has a little bit of a slower reload. I don't find that it's necessarily a problem when I'm playing with it, but it's certainly the slowest of the bunch. All right, now on to recoil pattern. And I took each gun into plunder and shot them both up a wall and a controlled shot to see which ones had the best recoil pattern and were the easiest to shoot. So I jumped in, and here's the FARA 83. I just shot it up the wall to have a look, and I'm not trying to control the recoil, I'm just shooting it and letting it climb. And here I'm controlling the recoil and getting the best pattern I can get at 15 meters, which is where all this is done. So this here is the Krig 6, and then I did the same with the AK-47, which was the only gun to actually go all the way up the building and shoot, you know, probably 8 or 10 bullets right off the top. And you can also notice on the controlled shot that it's a lot wider and harder to control. Then the Let's see, this is the XM4, has a weird pattern, but was a little bit easier to control. And then the M4A1 goes way up and over, although not hard to get a controlled shot on it. The GRA has a pretty good pattern. It just goes straight up, which is why it's so easy to use. And doing a controlled shot on it is really easy. And then there's the Ram 7, which goes up and over to the left. And it's not too hard to do a controlled shot on it, but this is only 15 meters. And then there's the CR56, which has a pretty good pattern on it, more recoil in the beginning, less at the end, and definitely is easier to shoot a controlled shot. So let's look at the patterns. So when looking at all the patterns, definitely the FAR 83 and the Krig 6 are the easiest and smoothest to shoot. The CR56 is sort of a close second, and then we get into, you know, the M4 and the GRA would probably be in third, and then there's a couple of weird ones. The Ram 7 and the XM4 would be in fourth place, and then the XM4, it's got to come last just because of the insane recoil. So let's go ahead and rank those. So as I said, I gave 8 to the FAR 83 and the Krig. I gave 7 to the CR56 because it's pretty close, but it's a little longer. 6 to both of these. They have really great, they got weird patterns, but they're really easy to control. And then a 5 to the XM4 and the Ram because they have a bit of a bizarre pattern. And then last place, the Cold War AK-47 because it's just crazy. All right, now let's look at range. So this is sort of a slightly different visualization on how much damage the guns can put out. And all of the guns have one damage drop off where their time to kill gets a little lower. And you can see it's all around about 25 to 35 meters, except for the Kilo, which actually has 2 drop offs, as you can see, and it's the worst gun at range, which is likely why not very many people are using it anymore. So when you look across, no surprise, the CR56, because of its fast time to kill, it's also got the greatest range and the lowest, time to kill over longer distances, followed closely by the AK-47. Except you can't actually hit your shots with the AK-47 way out here. That's sort of the recoil problem. XM4, also not my favorite, but pretty closely grouped with the FAR 83, which I do like, the Ram, which I do like, and the Krig 6, which I do like. So those ones are all pretty good. And then sort of out here in last place is the M4 and the GRA. You know, I sort of think both of these guns need to be buffed to be a little bit closer to these ones, but considering how smooth they shoot, I can kind of see why maybe they aren't in there. So let's go ahead and rank these. All right, so pretty well, came in with 8 for the CR56 and the AK-47 because they were the lowest. 7s for the FAR 83, the Krig, the XM4, and the Ram 7 because they were grouped in that sort of second grouping, and then 6s for both the M4 and the GRA. So you can see we're starting to shape up a little bit of, which guns are going to probably end up as the best. But we have one more thing to look at, and it's bullet velocity. Now, for bullet velocity, I looked at the base bullet velocity and also when the gun is maxed out with the muzzle and barrel that gives it the most bullet velocity. And when I look across, a couple things stand out. The CR56, which is strong in so many areas, is actually the lowest bullet velocity gun, which is crazy. But the Ram 7 and the M4 and the GRA are really high. They're all way up in the 1300s or almost 1300. And then the Cold War guns are all pretty well exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and rank those based on those scores. So for bullet velocity, I gave the Ram an 8, the GRA and the M4 7s. I gave 6 to all the Cold War guns and a 5 to the CR56. And wherever we landed, well, the CR56 came out first with 49 points, but closely followed by the Krig with 47 and the FAR 83 at 46. And that's not surprising. I would say these are probably the 3 meta weapons right now, likely what a lot of you guys are using. So if you are, you can definitely see that your choice sort of fits with the data here. And then in 4th place, the AK-47. I can't say I would use this thing at range. I'd be using a GRA or the M4 or the Ram. So these ones all sort of came in pretty close together. So I would say that any one of these guns, these are meta, right? The Krig and the FAR and the CR56, but any one of these guns, I don't think the AK-47, but any one of these guns is certainly viable to use and will work really well at medium, close, and even far. The AK-47 close and medium, definitely. That far range, I would definitely rather have, an M4 GRA or a Ram 7. So those would probably be my second choice before any of the meta guns if you're looking for something a little off meta. All right, guys, give me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Is there anything I missed, or did I score anything wrong, or is there maybe something else that's on your mind that you want to talk to me about? I love to hear feedback from you guys. So if you got something you want to say, put it in there and I'll be happy to respond to it and we can definitely discuss. I'm not saying I'm the absolute authority on, ARs in Modern Warfare, especially with the overall feel section. That's just my thoughts. Yours may vary. So don't take this too much the wrong way. It's just a sort of a guide to help you out, to help you make your own decision based on everything that I could come up with. So, remember that that's really what it is. Anyways, guys, if you don't see me in Warzone, if you don't see me in multiplayer, it's only a matter of time, baby. King James out.